Okay, very good evening, and it is my pleasure welcoming you once again, our viewing audience, to um, yet another in our panel discussion series from the Dr. Amrie Morris Patterson G.I.F.T Foundation seminar series. This is part 2 of our discussion, which we initiated last time, looking at the success mindset. We had a very, very informative and inspiring discussion. At that time, we would have had Dr. Shara Oliver Stewart with us and Mrs. Venice Jack, and they shared from their knowledge and experience on this topic. And as promised, because of the setback that we had in terms of the technology last time, we were not able to have our two of our panelists who should have joined us virtually. We have them in person this time, and we also have 2 additional quite qualified guests joining us. So we have 2 males, 2 females this time around once again, and we're going to have a very good time discussing this part 2 of this topic of the success mindset. So by way of brief introduction, we have Mrs. Tashika Haynes Bob, right? Development consultant and entrepreneur. Most persons would know in St. Vincent and the Grenadines anyway, at least I hope by now you should know the OSO brand of sauces, garlic sauce, etc. All right, so we're happy to have Tashika with us to share in this topic. Joining us as well is Mrs. Beverly Thompson, the Executive Director of the National Development Foundation, and she's also here to share from her wealth of experience, not just from the business side, but also generally speaking. She is a wife and mother as well, and leader in other respects. And next we have, next to me right here, Mr. Maurice John. He's a business owner of Caribbean Dreams, real estate agent and developer. I think he has a couple of things that he left out here, but we'll work with that for now. All right, and last but not least, we have Mr. Franz George, organizational and business psychologist. All right, and of course, for the topic that we're dealing with, the mindset as it relates to success, it's good to have somebody to give us that psychological perspective, right, and business as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Really want to thank you for sacrificing the time. I know you're all very busy people. Thank you for sacrificing the time for this worthy cause this evening. Hopefully those who are viewing and who will be viewing subsequently will indeed be benefited. So let's get right into it. We have a lot to share, and I know we don't usually have enough time. What is success, and is there a typical profile of a successful person? I don't know who wants to go first. Floor is open.
All right, let me get the ball off rolling. I think when I look at what people might deem as success, I don't think there's one standard definition of the term success. There are so many, success can come in so many different forms. You have the Christian definition of what success is. And if you ask a Christian what is a success, they're going to tell you first and foremost, are you doing things to get to heaven? If you ask somebody who don't believe in God what success is and they're in the world, they're going to tell you, have you attained as much wealth as possible? And I believe within that duality of those two things, of earthly treasures and heavenly treasures, there's some balance that has to be struck to kind of summarize what success is all about. But in terms of the success mindset and getting to that end goal that we all can adequately define, I look at children and walking. I always look at the process of walking, and I've been able to observe from small human beings, having a child myself. A child will try and try and try and fail and fail and fail at walking, and they do it because they observe the environment they see around them, and we're all walking, and no matter how many times they fall, it's not a case where they reflect on the fall. It's the let me try again, try again, try again. And as soon as they start actually walking, they forget about everything else and just keep walking. And I think the mindset of success has to be with you are not going to always make it when you try something. But are you willing to try and fail and keep trying and failing and eventually figuring it out? And even if you don't figure it out, what lessons have you gathered in that process? That's my.
Right? Anyone else? Yeah, your take reminds me of the is it Thomas Edison reference where he failed a lot of times before he actually invented the light bulb. And when he got, I think he had like maybe hundreds, if not 1,000 tries, and he said, now he knows 1,000 ways not to do it. Something like that, right? So, yes. Someone else.
Yes, so I am more or less share the same view as Maurice does with success. Success essentially is achieving a goal, or whether it's a personal or business goal. And it would mean different things to different people. So everybody would have goals, and the goals would differ. And when you have achieved it, then you can see that you are successful. So the successful mindset is working towards the goal and focusing on the goal. You deal with the process of getting to the goal, and when you've achieved it, then that will. So in that case, success is not necessarily a straight line, a linear, but rather going through around and around until you achieve it.
No, you said that. I'm wondering, it's often said, or sometimes said, it's not the destination, it's the journey. Is that really true? Is there, I mean, we're talking about success and you want to get somewhere, but how do you view that aspect of the process? Use a word, you talked about focus and working towards, what is the role, how do you see the process itself? Not just the destination.
I think I could jump in there. For me, I want to agree with the other panelists in terms of success not being the same thing for everybody. For instance, I could decide today that my goal is to do absolutely nothing. I can successfully do that, right? I can sit on my couch or just on my bed, and I can successfully do that. But I think the term that we're looking at today, success, is not really that particular piece. And so, in order to achieve or to accomplish that goal, then for me, you have to have a growth mindset. Because as you said, you're going to have meandering, you're going to have carving out your own path, you're going to have obstacles, hurdles, and all of those things. So you have to have a growth mindset and not a mindset of just whether I'm successful or whether I'm a failure. You have to look at it where you are open enough with yourself to allow yourself to fail, to allow yourself to learn from those failures. And as you usually reference with Thomas Edison, you said, where if he had given up, if he didn't have a growth mindset, then he would have given up. I know I heard a story about the WD-40 product that all of us know, and that it got its name because they successfully got the formula after 40 tries. So they call it WD-40. That's how the name came about. Now, had they stopped at 39, we wouldn't have WD-40, would we? So it's all about a growth mindset for me and your attitude towards learning from your mistake, learning the correct way and the incorrect way, and just taking those life lessons towards the ultimate goal.
All right, so I want to jump in now. I want to agree with the sentiment that success is achieving a desired goal or outcome. I think we're definitely all on the same page there. But I want to elaborate on that a bit more. Maurice sort of hinted to it when he said that different persons, depending on what walk of life they're coming from, might have a different definition of success. I'd want to reframe that and sort of tie it into the definition of achieving a goal. Different persons from different walks of life would have different goals. Like you said, your goal might just be to what? Do nothing. And that is your goal. I might have a different goal. And the point I want to bring across right here, right now, is that success is a very personal thing, because goal setting is very personal. And very often, society likes to dictate what success should look like for individuals. But personally, I reject that altogether, because I am a living, walking example of someone who has rejected definitions of success that were prescribed to me, and I said, no, I am going to walk my own path. I am setting my own goals. Right? Now, sometimes someone's personal goals may align with what society may prescribe for them. Right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But the point I'm making is it all boils down to the person. They have to be the one to say, I desire this, I want to achieve this, and therefore I am going to do whatever it takes to achieve it. Now, I don't think we can frame success without talking about failure. Right? Because in very simple terms, if we say success is the achievement of a goal, then failure that we've been speaking about so far is not achieving the goal. Now let me tie several things together. I have a personal goal for myself in terms of what my life should look like in a certain amount of years. As accomplished as I am now, if I don't achieve those things and I am to remain as I am now, I would consider myself a failure. And that's because I am using the goal that I've set as a reference point for what success would look like for me. Other persons might look at me and say, but friends already do this and do that and achieve this and achieve that. I ain't paying attention to people. I'm paying attention to what goal I've set for myself. And based on that, as I said, if I don't achieve that, I would say it's a failure. But we sometimes have a negative connotation when it comes to that thing called failure. Right? And I think we need to make it very clear that failure is not necessarily a bad thing. Case in point, you had to fail, 39 times to get a WD-40. And I'm quite sure that WD-40 is in pretty much every household right now. Global, exactly. If I never use it, you know somebody who uses it. Right? Yeah. The point is, failure is sometimes a necessary part of success. Some people are fortunate enough that they achieve success in one shot. But they're unicorns. They're very unique. The average person, even the people who might consider to be the most successful persons in life, they would have gone through a process of failure. And the thing is that instead of looking at failure as a bad thing, we need to look at it as a stepping stone towards failure. And I usually like to term it as failing forward. So we would have failed forward 39 times to that one time which was successful. And I bet that the inventor, his goal was to produce a lubricant that could get rid of rust and allow things to work smoothly. So he would have failed forward 39 times, right? Now I said a mouthful there, and I just want to end the last question, which is the profile of a successful person. And this is where I want to delve into a little bit of psychology, right? So we said success is setting a goal, but there has to be a process in terms of how somebody would achieve that goal. And through psychological studies, and that's the angle I'm going to take, no matter what the goal has been, whether it is something simple or something grand, studies have shown that there are certain key traits that are somehow common amongst successful people, right? Now, it does not mean that all successful people have all these traits. And it does not mean that if you don't have these traits at all, that you won't become successful. All we're saying is these are traits that are somehow common among successful people, and therefore there's a correlation, right? Now, the first one is, I'm not going to give you the big psychological term because most persons might not even understand it. So I'm going to give you in very simple terms. Break it down, right? So the first one is being responsible, organized, and dependable. That's the first trait, right? The second trait is having low levels of negative emotions. The next one is being able to connect with people around you. The other one is the tendency to be able to cooperate and be empathetic towards those other people. So it's about connecting with them, but also being able to work with them. And then the last one is having a level of imagination and curiosity. Right? Now, as I said, these are traits common among successful people, regardless of the level of success or the goal that they would have set out. These are just some traits that are common amongst them. Not saying that there aren't other traits, and I'm not saying that somebody has to have all these. And what you might find, because human beings are so fluid, is that even a successful person, even if they had all these 5 traits at one point, it doesn't mean that they had it all the time. So for example, the one that said low levels of negative emotion, let's look from a business standpoint. I could guarantee you, even the most successful entrepreneur had times when he had high levels of negative emotion. Yet still, there would have been times when he had low levels of negative emotion, which means that at the end of the day, we are looking at what is the consistency of these negative emotions there. Right.
I want to respond to you quickly.
By all means.
With an example of define and sometimes zeroing in on the definition of sometimes what success could mean to different people. And I think that the best example sometimes is a personal example. How something simple could be a central part in people's life. So our parents tend to be the biggest guiding lights in our lives, for the negatives and for the positives. Some people are snuffed out by their parents, some people grow under their parents' tutelage. And I know for both parents, I think poverty was their biggest driver. So my mother lived among 10 children, and they grew up poor. So their mindset was education, 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 education. Every single day, education, education. My father would tell us almost every week you're here in the house. I grew up in a Watland Darb house, the only Watland Darb house in the community, and education is key, education is key. So they would have gone to university and educated themselves as much. and that was drilled in. So success equals education for them. And if you don't achieve it, it would not have fit within their understanding. The second component of that is family structure. So my mom lived in single parent household. So mother present, father not present. My father lived in a single parent household. Mother present, father not present. So they would have seen life through that lens, and you could see the kind of overcompensation for parenting. My father, which is a good thing, he would want to come to every PTA meeting. Don't let my father come to PTA meetings, but every parent day, and that. And then he will look at the lens of what was I missing as a father in my youth. I live in a mother house, poorest in the community, father equal provider. So in his lens, success is education, provider. And then zero into that kind of thing where my whole life is I provide and I educate. And then my mother now, same thing. I provide, I educate. And then for them, I'm certain at the end of their road, they'll say, I did what I'm supposed to do. All of our children have first degrees. Maya is going off to school. They will say that is successful. So environment changes people's perception on what success is. And then on the other side of that, it's making sure that you make sure your children go to church every Wednesday night, Friday, every Saturday night. Well, Saturday,
every time the
door open, they want you in the church. Because church also played this parent aspect too. So when you don't have a father in the household, you send your children to church, and you might boot up on a father figure. That is how they saw church. That you're going to boot up on parental figures and help you nurture your children. If you look at those lenses, and I am greatly influenced by my parents because it's homeschool work. I live in Argyle, nobody around until I was older. We live in a community, a bunch of retired people. Nobody outside, is just in-house, church, home. So I saw life through that scope.
Thanks for that. That's some personal take on it, and it's very, very important to those lessons. That point about the non-church benefits of church, so to speak, in the sense that mentorship aspect, you talk about father figures, very, very critical. And that would have, I think, played a role in a lot of people, success and growing from where they are and achieving the aspirations of the parents that, they beyond what they even could have imagined, right? Now,
But as much as I had a father, when I went to church, my class teacher, Brother Rodney, he passed away. But Brother Rodney was like my church dad. Brother Rodney taught us when we were small, and he literally, every time the class went up in age, he went up with the class. Because we were such a good group that he wanted to stick with us, and we were very inquisitive. Like, we will ask him questions, you had to go home, scratch your head, and come back and figure it out. Come with a whole briefcase worth of stuff. So he literally moved, like we were in the youth class in our late 20s, because he taught us all the way from a child. So, and I'm certain if you're going to find examples where somebody in the church would have impacted doing something like that.
I want to segue from that into the education system, right? You talk about, there's formal and informal education, but we're talking the formal education system, and you can talk about the deficiencies in that regard. So, is our education system adequately preparing students for academic and professional success? I was listening to an interview with one of these, I think he's like a human resource expert, I forget his name. Simon Simonek? Simonek, you might know him. All right, so he was lamenting, some of the deficiencies of the concerns he had regarding AI. AI is a big issue now in terms of education and generally speaking, all right? So he said, bearing in mind the question, right, is our education system doing what it's supposed to do? He said, you could go and get a book done via ChatGPT or any of these AI software, and the book could be done in maybe hours, maybe days, right? But the fact that he would have written a book, the process of writing a book yourself, the traditional way of writing a book, that is a painstaking process. If you do it right, it's a painstaking process, requires a certain amount of attention to detail, research, and all this stuff. That process, if you're not doing it the traditional way or properly, you can be robbing yourself. That's why I asked about process before, right? Anybody could slap the name on a book via via AI, right? And maybe tweak it a little bit. AI gives you an outline maybe, and you go in and you tweak it, you make it yours, that kind of thing. But he argues that to some extent, part of what is happening with the technology now is that we may be, our students may be robbing themselves of the process of learning and acquiring knowledge. All right, so I want you to factor that into your answer to this question. Is our education system adequately preparing students? They are being bombarded, they're told or required in many instances to use the technology. It's really hard to do a lot of what is required for school without having a laptop, having access to the internet. But are we missing anything? How are we doing in terms of the formal education system?
Okay, I could probably jump in here a little bit. So I've been to school a few years ago, not so long ago. not so long ago. But interestingly, I have a 10-year-old, and I think one of the things that I would have liked to see at this stage, having been to school just a few years ago, I would have liked to see IT introduced at the primary school level. I remember in my day, we didn't learn IT until we got to secondary school. And from what I've observed, because she's in grade 5 now, and what I've observed so far is that we're still on that page. That is very disappointing, because I think we're setting our future generation up for failure in terms of being as competitive as they could be in that field, because that's where AI starts. Everything starts with information technology, coding, development of apps, and all of these things. These things are not being taught at that age. Additionally, on the core curriculum I'm talking about, we're talking about the education system. We're not talking about the parents who, because of their own knowledge and understanding of what is happening, are investing in extracurricular classes or exposing them to apps, exposing them to different, I'm not talking about that, I'm talking about core curriculum, right? And then the other thing that I would have liked to see change from my few years ago is having some sort of integration into financial management, financial investments, how to invest. We were taught back in our day, and it's no fault of our parents and everything like that. We were taught we should go to school, get our subjects, maybe go to university, to get a job. You're not taught to be entrepreneurs. We were not taught to take risks. We were not educated on financial matters and investment and all of these things. And from what I'm seeing, there's still a wide gap with that in our education system. And from what I'm seeing, even since COVID, these younger generation, they don't want a 8 to 4 like our parents had. They want to make their own money. They want to do their own hustle. They want
Their own time.
They want to have their jobs that they could work, what do you just call it, remotely, and all of this thing, because they want to live while they're alive. All we do is work, work, work. Our generation, work, 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 and we meet up at funerals. They don't want that. They want to be able to have a good quality of life while they're making a living. And I think we are doing our children an injustice in that regard. I think we could be doing more from the prime minister.
I know you're itching, right?
I know he itching.
You are totally disagreeing with him. You know why you're totally disagreeing with him? He is trying to sell the idea that the old way of doing things is being lost.
Yeah, but
Writing a book by the long process, no using AI, and then you're saying we need to bring it even to the primary school level.
But I'm not totally disagreeing, because the thing about it is, if you want to be a good writer, a good friend of mine who's an English teacher was having a discussion just today about it. You have to learn the fundamentals of writing. Right? There are no shortcuts to that. And maybe through AI, there's a course that you can learn in a shorter time than a whole semester. So they can vary.
You have to find, if AI gives you something, you need to be able to critique it.
Let's define this, because we need to understand what we're really saying. Because you are saying we need to not to be left behind. Because St. Vincent,
we are being left behind.
And St. Vincent is going to be left behind.
We are already behind. We are already behind.
The mere fact of the matter is, there was a $1 billion industry that required no physical presence. You had to just code, submit to the App Store, make billions of dollars. St. Vincent was not a part of it. Now that AI could do everything for you, we're again going to be left behind. We've covered that.
And it spills over even into business.
It spills over into, no, but wait, let me finish. Now,
over.
if we are going to tiptoe around AI and say, and let me give you the classic example of why adoption is required in this modern time. When I left UE, I said, like if you go back and watch the video of my presentation of Caribbean Dreams, IBM at the time introduced just a basic artificial intelligence software. And I played around with it and I tried to build a bot that could respond to messages. Why did I want to do that? I wanted to bring proper websites to St. Vincent, go online, and address the fact that we live in different time zones. And I understood, if I'm looking at the data, people in California, in Europe, come onto the website at different hours. And if I'm sleeping and I'm getting messages and I'm missing them, there needs to be an ever-present AI there to address those concerns. I tried to build it. I was not as good at it. But now the AI has actually gotten to a point where it is actually years later very much better. Now, somebody else might be looking at it and say, oh, AI coming to take my job. But if you don't evolve, because back I started real estate 10 years ago. When you want to look for properties, you just send an Excel sheet. You just send an Excel sheet with no photos. And if you want to find the property, you have to go every one of them, cross-check them and say, okay, this is, and then go and drive around. We came out, we did videos, and people were like, oh, this is modern, this is new. Did it make me less of an agent? No. It made the process of doing business. Like your phone ring, it's people from all over the world calling because you have a digital presence. AI is going to force a lot of people to now realize that if you are not needed, how could you adjust to be needed? And there's nothing that is going to stop that. So the people who write books, you are not going to be needed soon.
I'm going to throw something in there because we're still on the track of success, right? Yes, so my younger daughter is about to go to UA to do computer science.
I will tell her don't do
So
I-
we have had that
I'll be very
discussion,
honest
right?
with you.
I know.
I will tell her
Let
don't do
finish.
that.
So, we had that discussion because we discussed AI,
Why
the
would I
pros
tell
and
her
cons
not
of doing that, of pursuing a computer science degree in the age of AI. She's going to go ahead still. There's some tweaking to be done, mitigation, I should say, to be done there, right? So, but in all of that, I want to throw in food sufficiency. I want to throw in just the basic, you might say, vocational aspect of life. Not everybody's going to be an AI expert or a business consultant, and there are still certain basic vocational skills that are going to be needed, right? Bear in mind, the question is our education system adequately preparing students for academic and professional success? So, okay, fine, we may be those students who are inclined towards computer technology and that aspect of things. Okay, they seem to have things set for them, or there's a path for them.
What aspect of food are you talking about? Food
I'm talking
production?
about food production, right?
But,
I'm talking
I mean,
about...
we have many examples of technology applied to food production that is actually making farming more attractive for our young people. And that is something that we have to continue to explore and continue to grow on.
Right,
Because
so...
across the region, globally, there's an issue of aging farmers. And in order to attract young persons to get into farming, you cannot sell farming as hope and hard work and hot sun and dirty clothes. It's not going to be attractive for these young people. But when you marry farming with technology and you show them that they can actually make a decent living, then you're going to get them excited. I remember when I was studying, I was doing my master's in Taiwan, and we went to a poultry farm. And I'm there waiting for the farmer. This dude drives up in a three-piece suit in a BMW, and I see him capsing across, and I'm like, okay, I in the wrong place. That was the farmer. And he had a fully automated farm with 3 employees. And this man was doing over 100,000 eggs. So what they were doing in Taiwan is that they were actually inviting CEOs, big companies, to come to do farming. And this we've seen even regionally. We've had many examples where persons, okay, I have a farm, I need to introduce technology in order to be able to irrigate my farm without me having to go there and put on a hose. We have people doing microgreens. We have people doing farming from inside their house. We have people doing mushrooms. The younger people are going to the high value commodities, and they're intertwining it with technology. So we can't get
So
away
the
from
basic point I want to make, though, I want to take a sort of a higher view, right? Basic point of the question is, whatever your aptitude, your inclination in terms of skill set, your giftedness, right? Are we adequately preparing our young people so they feel like, okay, there is a place for me, whether that is in IT, whether that is in farming, whatever low-tech, high-tech version of farming.
No. That was actually where I was going to carry the conversation.
Just a basic, let me get your take.
Right?
Yes.
And by all means, anybody jump in when they feel like, right?
Can I ask you a question?
All right, very quickly, and then I go and make my point.
Right? Do you really believe in today's world where the CEO of Anthropic has said publicly for the first time there is going to be a collapse in society because of AI in the workforce? Do you believe if America is going to face such a wake-up call because of artificial intelligence, that St. Vincent is ready for that kind of stuff?
Well, I'm no IT or tech expert. I don't know what our IT and tech capabilities are. I'm not in tune with the scene, the tech scene here in Vinci, right? But if I were to go with a gut feeling, I would say that as a country, and even more so as a region, we are not prepared for that, right? And I don't think it's unique to our region either. I think it's something that is global, right? I think we have to understand the gravity of what we're entering into. It's akin to the Industrial Revolution, where before people used to have to stand up in lines in factories, and one person put together one part and pass it to the next person, and they put on the next screw. And so manual labor was needed to put things together until the machinery was developed where these things could have been automated. And then we know a lot of these factories needed manpower no more, right? What they then needed were the persons who could monitor the machinery, operate the machinery, and maintain the machinery, right? So I think we're entering into another revolution. And my honest opinion is, because of the extent to which this is revolutionary, there is no stopping it. And I think we have to be very balanced in our conversation about AI. Because yes, there has been questionable applications of AI. But there have been some extremely positive applications where people who would have otherwise been dead are now alive because of the insights that AI is providing in medicine, right? We're also talking about efficiency in producing items that are critical for persons' lives. So let's say some medication, it was hard to get a breakthrough, but because of AI, we can now produce this life-saving medication much cheaper and make it more available for persons, so then we could hopefully eradicate certain diseases, right? Now, let's take a few steps back. First of all, let me answer the question about does the education system prepare us for success? That alone, right? And let's go back to the central definition of success, which is the ability to set a goal and work towards it and achieve it. Does our education system equip students to do that process, right? Now, at the end of the day, it really boils down to what the goals that students are setting. There are some students who the education is adequate because what they want to achieve is what they want to achieve, just that. But there are still a lot of young persons who have goals that unfortunately the education system does not prepare them to achieve those goals. That
just an example. An example. Like
for example, take myself, right? I know for a fact that had it not been for other influences, I would not be as successful as I am today. If it was dependent only on the education system in SVG, having placed third for common entrance, having gone to grammar school, having gone to community college. Because my goal for success in a little house with a yard, couple of fruit trees, no. And that's what, and I want to say something in disagreement. You said no fault to our parents. I am very cut and dry. I would say to the fault of the older generation, right? And let me tell you why. Let me tell you why.
They didn't know better.
Well,
no, hold on. And I'd get to that. And it's not something that I am bashing. It's just a matter of accountability, because there's no problem with saying I have been inadequate in some ways, or I did not have the foresight for certain things to even mentor other young people better. I am okay with saying that because that has been a fact, right? The thing is, I think that growing up, Vincentian society in general, not just the education system, but society, parenting, even church, I have some success to attribute to the church. But even in general, had I remained here, I don't think I would have achieved some of the things I really set out to achieve.
But then the education system wasn't sufficient.
For me.
Right.
For my goals.
Right. So the point I was making, right, is that But I went to school a few years before you, right?
Correct.
So 2 years or so, not much, right? So what I'm trying to say is back then, our parents who never had an opportunity to even go to secondary school,
Right.
that was something that was just for the few rich.
Correct.
Right.
So they were satisfied with.
I agree with that too, you know.
So their level, their vision of success for their children was go to school, and that was taught at school as well. We were not given the sort of choices that young people have now. We didn't have. So we were school, and sometimes I always say, you know, behind closed doors, that we were miseducated. Well, I'm saying it publicly now. We were miseducated because we were taught that we go to school, we maybe go to university to get a job. But I saw what a job looked like, and I didn't want that life. And so for me, it was any port for a storm. And I left here when Cuba was real, real hard. And I left here not knowing nothing about Cuba, no hablo no Spanish. And I said, any port for a storm, I do not want to sit down in an office and sign papers and take cash. And I didn't want that life. But I'm saying that they did the best that they could with what they knew.
And I agree with that
Right?
too, you know. So we're on the same page so far.
So having known better, now I cannot train my daughter to go
Well,
to
that same route,
university
yeah,
and
yeah.
just get a job and so forth. And that's why that's one of the biggest reasons I became an entrepreneur, to set an example for her, to show her that there's more, and that anything that she puts her mind to, when she's in line with God and she walks with Him, let Him know her plan.
If I could
Cannot change
contextualize my statement,
Yes, yes.
If I could
I think we
contextualize
agree
my
more than we
statement,
disagree, right? Yeah.
because I am very
Yes.
much in agreement with you with most of what you just said, yet still I would still say to the fault of the older generation. Because even in my position now as a young man, one of the key things I always have to do is, no matter how much I have been trained in a particular way, no matter how much I know now, I have to acknowledge what I don't know and accept the fact that how I have been brought up, or what even the way I think now, may not necessarily be what is going to be needed for tomorrow. So I have to accept my ignorance in that sense, and even acknowledge that even the way I think right now may be obsolete in the future. So accepting that, I would say that in mentoring any young person, and if I were to have children, I can't teach them to think based on how I am thinking or how I used to think. I have to train them to think for themselves based on circumstances that we don't even know yet, right? And that's where I draw the line right there, because I don't think that the older generation was thinking or forecasting, right? They were thinking based on their circumstance, right?
See, my friend here was-
So, and let me just finish up that point, right? And the reason why I say so is because if we look around, there's an obvious deficit of innovation, right? And to your point, Maurice, where you said that we are going to be left behind, right? The question is, who have been the persons preparing us to move forward, right?
And who should have.
And all I'm saying, I have no problem in accepting my own setbacks and my own faults and my own ignorance, even in how I've mentored people. So all I'm saying is a matter of accountability. They tried their best, but it's simple a case where even with the best, something was lacking, and they have to own that.
And I'll take your point, and I'll agree. I take Bev, and then
I could not have jumped
Maurice.
in with the IT because I'm not affair with the IT. But as he mentioned, a few things that's how I looked at the question and the answers to the question. That is the education system preparing the students for academic and professional success. And I would want to say not fully. because it cannot fully either. Because you mentioned the church, mentors, and other institutions around that must play a part in assisting and helping the students to be successful. The school, the educational system, the formal education system, I believe, can do much more because it is streamlined. I believe I'm not an educator here, but I'm seeing I have children products of the system, and I see the streamlining of it, and I see the gaps, especially speaking from the financial business side of it. I see students come out and they might want to take the entrepreneurial route, but they were never prepared in school and university for the entrepreneurship.
Right.
And that's where I believe that much more can be done in giving them the critical thinking, the teamwork,
Correct.
and those soft skills that
Yeah.
they
So
don't
stick
they
up
seem not
in there, you start to
getting.
talk my language right there, right? And let me just sum up the whole question about, is the education system preparing us for success? I'm gonna use an analogy, right? And it's about shepherd, sheep, wolves, and you know the shepherd usually have like a wolf dog. I mean, a sheep dog to help protect the sheep, right? So the sheep are people who just follow the system. The sheepdog is the ones who help to maintain the system. The wolves are the ones who go against the system, so to speak, right? And I think the education system, as it is, or based on what it is capable of doing, I should say, because there's a discussion of resources, etc., it only prepares persons to either follow a system, maintain a system, or in some instances, some people might not like the system and they revolt against it. But you know the one thing that the education system doesn't prepare people to be? Who's the one person I leave out? The shepherd. And what does the shepherd do? He dictates the whole thing. He determines who the rules are. He is the one who the sheep ultimately follows. He is the one who guides the sheepdog.
I thought you were
Right?
going to say the system
I-
doesn't
Right?
doesn't take into
I want-
consideration the goats.
Right? No. But the point I'm making is
Yeah, closer to 7.
the real thing is the real thing to success, and this goes now to the process of attaining success. You have to understand first of all yourself. Understand your capacity, understand your capabilities, your skills, whatever, and you have to also be able to think in an imaginary. Remember we said one of the traits is you must have curiosity and imagination to think of a goal. And based on who you are and what you are, you have to come up with a plan, right? And be structured enough to achieve this plan. And that plan might mean accepting you don't have the skills, but part of the process is upskilling or outsourcing the skills, right? So it's not so much about subjects that gets you to success. And I think there's somebody who have degrees and go and get even more degrees, right? It's not so much about the subjects. It's about mindset. It's about the mental traits. It's about the soft skills, right? And the real question is, does the education system empower young people to see possibilities and set corresponding goals and believe that aspect is important, believe they can achieve those goals? Does the education system help them to really and truly assess their potential, skills, talents, resources, aptitudes, and then based on that, create a proper plan and gain the necessary help? Hold on. Does it really help persons to gain and maintain the necessary skills and effectively implement the plan to achieve the goal and maintain that level of perseverance that they could keep on failing forward, right? Does it currently do that in its current form? My professional opinion is no, right? For the large part, because I do think that while some students do set goals and achieve them and they can accredit that success to the education system, whatever that might be, based on my interaction with the youth since coming back to Simmons, they aspire for more. but for whatever reason, despite having that goal in mind, they're not able to make that connection between where they are now and where they need to get to. And this is not necessarily to say the education system has failed, right? Because I also have to agree with her. Is the education system really capable of doing everything to prepare somebody for success, right? And we have to really take a step back and think that as a society as a whole, when we look at families, when we look at institutions, organizations, everything else that complements the education system, has the focus really been on shaping people's minds to that extent, right? Because trust me, there have been people in other parts of the world in worse physical conditions, right? Have a lot of crises around them. Crises that humans never see yet. Well, maybe not since slavery, right? Yet still, because they had that mindset and they had the mental traits to follow through with that process, they were able to achieve success, right? And there's a video I saw about the education system where they don't even have structured classes. But yet still, when they were able to measure the mental competencies of the students and so on, everybody was scoring high. So that's just food for thought. One of those Scandinavian countries, correct.
Let me respond to that, and I try to be as quick as possible because we're getting closer.
Our time is running.
The reason why I wanted to have a lot on AI is because we cannot, in 2025, define success without mentioning AI. There are no symbiotic relationships. And we need to understand why it is a symbiotic relationship. You go to school from 8 to 3, and your teacher teaches you core subjects. And you have to understand, yes, they might change or they might evolve, but they're going to there to teach you maths, English, core subjects. Now, I'm going to use myself as an example. As AI develops, information is now becoming not only free, but it is able to work for you. So in my parents' time, information was hidden behind a textbook that they couldn't afford. In my time, information was free because I could watch YouTube. I spent most of my UE days learning more from YouTube than my professors.
At the library.
All right.
Well, some of these things that you have subscription, you have to pay.
Right, but now in my son's time, there are going to be a phone app that you could get in education. Now let me give a classic example. I download my monthly bank statement and I upload the PDF to Claude. I pay for Claude every month. And I say, analyze my spending, my income and expenses, give me a summary and tell me how I could do better. And Claude does an analysis of my PDF, tells me how much money I took out at the ATM, how much money I spent on subscriptions, and be able to tell me my economic outlook. That now means I don't have to pay an accountant. And if that is allowing me to gain another superpower, that I could then make quick business decisions, it is now unlocking not just me looking at a video from an accountant and figuring it out, but it's now giving me a power of, it is giving me the answer at the end of the rainbow so that I could then focus on something else. And you could make strategic decisions. You understand the difference there? So we move from behind of a paywall, information, to free information, to actionable data. And that is where now, as deficient as school system is, AI is now going to be another. So the internet was the great reset, where people of anywhere across the world could have participated in the economy of the world. But now, AI is going to now reset again, that if you are seeking to better yourself in every part of your life, you are going to be able to optimize yourself and become even more focused if you are looking and understanding the right things. So your goals are going to change because you have not only, when you set a goal based on the information that you have, so when you get more information, you set greater goals. So now that you have actively better data, you're going to set even higher goals. But you need to now optimize yourself to fit in the wall of AI, or you're going to be left behind.
All right, so I feel like we need to have a separate program to deal with the AI and maybe the psychology of AI.
Research Claude.
Right.
You could use Claude. I like Claude.
I will go.
GPT.
I want to go to the next. Well, we're gonna finish here because we're not having a part 3. So AI, very important, very critical. I wasn't downplaying AI. I'm just saying, AI. I don't know if the latest versions have overcome this, but they used to have a thing called hallucinations.
Yes.
About hallucinations, right? Where AI actually makes mistakes and makes stuff up, right? Which is why I said the basic skills of research and verification and those things, you still have to have your foundational.
The same with the internet. Anybody
right, so you have to. Right, but people talk about AI sometimes in some very glowing terms that don't address those threats, those issues, right? No,
I think what we need to acknowledge, like any other tool before AI,
right. Exactly my point.
It can be used effectively, it can be used ineffectively,
right, or even nefariously.
For good, and it can be used for bad.
Exactly.
And we just need to focus on how could we prepare students, young people, and society to efficiently use it for
in the best way. So we've talked about a number of factors as it relates to success. I've talked about growth mindset and so on. There is okay. Let me not cite a personal example or someone's life. But the issue is you can be successful materially, financially, and sometimes this does not translate into marital success, spiritual success. Why is that? And how do you ensure? Sometimes people talk about work-life balance, right?
I was actually going to say.
How do you deal with that in terms of making sure that your professional academic success translates into your family life, your relationships, or is that or is that expecting too much? And your yes.
And you said it. A lot of people in their quest for success, they have their tunnel vision. That's my goal. And they're seeing all the red flags and they're seeing all the things that decide, and they say, okay, I'll make a mental note of it. It's something I have to work at after I achieve this goal. And they put the goal ahead of everything else, and they cause neglect to set in. So you have to, while you are, and again, in many spheres you would hear about SMART goals, and that would give you an idea as to how to set goals that are realistic, that are specific, attainable, time-bound, all of these things. And we get so caught up on achieving our SMART goals that we become fools in the other departments of our lives. And you have to find a way to create that balance while you are attaining your goal, and not forget the people who are the closest to you, the people that mean the most to you, your family, your relationships, and so forth. Because to me, if you neglect all of those other things while you're attaining your goal, you're going to reach at the top of the mountain, but it's going to be you alone up there. And at the end of the day, is it worth it? And I see you say something here about the spirituality. I have found, I don't know, I am old school. I don't do anything without God. If it's even a simple recipe, it comes from God. If I want to make a move, I go to God first and my husband next. It's that order, right? And I look at it as a part of the process for me. If God sanctions it. I always, when I pray, even if I want to go through a door, I say, God, if you don't open that door, I'm not a thief. I'm not going to go through no window. Unless he opens that one specific door for me, I am not going through it. I go a step further. I say, God, don't open two doors. I'm not bright. I'm not going to choose the right one. Open one alone. That's how big. I don't want confusion. I want it to be, I want all of my steps to be aligned by his guidance and what his purpose is. Because we can make plans, but our plans, if they're not God's plans for our life, then we're just planning to fail, right? So to me, you take those things into consideration, and you always have to make time for your family, for your health. A lot of people in their quest for success, they neglect their health. They want to be Superman and Superwoman. In 2024, I decided that I am going to, my word for 2024 was no. And it may sound jovial, but I realized that I was saying yes to everything everybody asked me for, and then I was empty, and I cannot continue giving from an empty vessel. And so I had to say no, step back, spend time in, refilling my own self so that then I can selectively pour. It's not everybody you have to. Some people, they're just there. The devil is real. They're just there to draw your good resources. So you, even in helping, you have to ask God to give you guidance so that you don't lose your soul in the process.
When you said at the beginning, right, when you mentioned, you kind of made it probably tongue-in-cheek a bit when you said your goal might be to do nothing, just to sit down and do nothing. And there is a time for that.
It's necessary.
That's a, you might call it resting or just relaxation, but there is a critical need for, you have to know for yourself, but that downtime and just sleep. I listened to a medical doctor do a presentation on sleep. And when I finished watching that presentation, I said, boy, I need to make sure I sleep. I can't miss, usually it's 6 to 8 hours. When he described all the processes that go on in the rejuvenation of the body, the restorative metabolic processes and so on, I said, wow, this thing is critical. All right, so yes, those aspects of, balancing the professional with others.
I just want to add to that. While we're thinking about success and reaching our goals, we also have to mingle that with happiness, because sometimes we achieve the goal, but we are not happy. So you say you reach the top of the mountain, you're alone, and you're not happy. So it's very important that in the pursuit of success, achieving the goal, there should also be the pursuit of happiness, and not just happiness for yourself, but happiness for others around you, because in essence, we are all here. And I always use this. Well, I reflect, and sometimes I would talk about it with my husband or even my children. When you go to funerals, what are the things being said of the deceased? Are they saying how much you have achieved academically? How far you have traveled? No. People, and that's, even though society would push you, success is having fame, popularity, money, wealth, what have you. But at the end of the day, when your life is over, the success, and that to me, even though they're not saying success in the funeral, but to me, it translates into a successful person. So it might be true, so it might not be true. But the essence is, what they're saying is how many lives they have touched. Everybody comes up and they talk about what this person was a blessing to them, what they have, the softer skills, the people interaction, and those in achieving the academic goals and maybe the monetary goals, we also have to prioritize our well-being. We have to prioritize our relationships, family, our friends, our circle, and that at the end you can say true. You have attained true success. So we have to bear and balance all of that, because you can be the, and look at all many of the millionaires. If you do a search on Google for successful individuals, it would come up with persons who are wealthy, persons who are making big impact in whatever arena, but mainly in the financial arena. But at the end of the day, what's the family life like and the social life. Some of them commit suicide, and some of them, divorce, remarried, divorce, remarried. So that's because the priority and as you said, the one focus is on just success being achieving. Well,
If I may just sort of sum up what two of you have been saying but not saying directly. Persons who, as you framed in the question, who have achieved success in one area but not spiritually, health-wise, family-wise, is really because they never really and truly set goals in those areas. You notice what you guys have been saying is that they have prioritized, right? There has been a clear goal in terms of material success, but it has not been balanced by clear goals in other aspects of life. And therefore, while there has been a level of intentionality in achieving material success, everything else has sort of been somewhat happenstance, right?
And to add to that, right, I would just leave, this will be my final point on this, because the thing about it is that I agree with you with what you're saying in terms of them not having goals for those specifics. But remember, we're just talking mostly about the success part of it, right? I think one of the biggest problems is that what I've seen, and it's troubling, everybody is about manifestations, and I curate the life that I want, and I manifest it. Yes, there's power in the tongue, the Bible says so. But the thing about it, in Proverbs 16:3, it said, ask the Lord to bless your plans, and you will be successful in carrying them out. If you don't take your plans are goals, plans. If you don't plan, you don't take those goals to God, you are not going to achieve success. You would have an aspect of it. You would have success in an area, as you're rightly saying. But ultimately, you are going to.
Right. And if I were to just use the Bible as a reference, I think the Bible sums up every aspect of life, right? And it even points out material success, but it also points out success in other areas. But you know what's the key thing about the Bible? What it tells us to do is to be intentional, right? Intentional in following a specific pathway to gain success in all aspects of life. And so the point I want to make is, as clear as we set goals for material things, we have to set goals for every other aspect of life. And as much as we work hard and we're intentional about material things, we have to work hard and be intentional about every other aspect of life. Which may mean that when you see you have all these goals, you have to take a step back and say, well, hey, now boy, I'm one man. Can I alone achieve all of this? And therefore the question is, if you want to achieve all of them, and you should aim for that, is about how can you get the help? Not just spiritual, of course, but from community. Because as we said, one of the key traits of a successful person is being able to connect with people and being able to leverage those connections. As a true business person, right? Whether it is to a human or to AI.
So from my point on this, if you search the scriptures, scripture says a man who doesn't leave an inheritance for his children's children, right? The same Bible says, I'd rather live on a housetop than in a house with a quarrelsome woman. And the same Bible says, fear God. So it's basically saying you have to have a good spiritual life and fear God. You better marry well and have a good family, and you have to leave an inheritance for your children. So that, to me, has always been, and there must be a great balance on all fronts. So somebody who says, me no want nothing physical, you are a waste. I'm gonna say it plain and probably talents. It's not about, oh, I could sing in church. No, it's I give you resources. What have you done with them? And then when you look at the family life, the Bible is littered about family life and balancing it. And of course, the Bible is written to deal with the spiritual life. And I'm telling you, it's the hardest thing to figure out that juggle of those 3 months. As if you miss on marriage, you're going to be miserable. If you miss on God, the next two going to be miserable. If you miss on achieving some level, and COVID taught us this, people had to, well, regardless of how your belief systems were, you believed, oh, I don't want this thing in my hand, but I have my mortgage to pay. You have to make a choice. And because we live from paycheck to paycheck, you have to make this decision. So all of these things, not figuring out how do I live without having to slave? How do I be a good husband and father without messing up, not providing? How do I go to church every week and go to all of these board meetings and without sacrificing? I'm telling you, I'm talking from personal experience. I was elder, AY leader. You had weeks in the week that there are days in the week that every single night I was at church. Then I had to say, boy, I have a child now. I have to step back a little. I mean, I step back a bit too far because I go to church, but I'm not so deeply involved, and I need to figure that out. But I'm telling you, it's the most complicated thing to figure out about. It's very difficult.
As Toshika said, I think, seeking back is, I've been there. I think a lot of us have experienced that. So you have to know where your limits are and prioritize your family. I want to end a final question. Sorry, I want to close with this final question, kind of a double-barrel question. This issue of setbacks and failures and your mental health, safeguarding that in the process. As I said, we typically deal with mental health challenges in these discussions. I've looked at from grief, trauma, depression, all these things, and those can really, put a dent in your drive towards success, your moves that you might want to make towards success. You're not psychologists, so I don't expect you to give me, but as lay persons, we have a psychologist here. How do you really, harness the tools to deal with setbacks and get your mind right? You lose a spouse, you lose a loved one, you have some kind of disease diagnosis that, could just derail everything that you have in mind, whether it's professional or for your family. How do you process these problems, these setbacks on the way still to achieving success?
I will tell you. Well, my first advice to you is watch the movie Finding Nemo. The reason why I tell you, and I tell people this all of the time, watch the movie Finding Nemo and understand the character of Dory. What was Dory's flaw? But how grace it asset. Anybody watch the movie Finding Nemo?
A long time ago.
Long time ago.
Dory
I can't remember.
She forgot everything. She was always happy. And I've had major setbacks in life. Major setbacks in life. Terrible setbacks in life. Setbacks that people buy like, oh, Jesus Lord, setbacks. But I adopt a Dory personality. It's fail, I wake up the next morning, I don't remember it. I try my best not to remember it. Keep a smile on my face.
But is that literally possible?
It
You
is
say
not
don't
possible.
forget.
It is not really possible. But you cannot. You have to act like you forget. And your brain sometimes, I think I watched something where if you tell your brain that your hand is on fire, you're going to start to see signs of burns. So you have to get up every single day and convince yourself mentally that you are going to forget. And I'm going to tell you a personal story. His wife was my doctor. I went to Trinidad, had an episode at Trinidad. my entire life changed. Like, people looked at me different. Like, I had to wake up from this sheltered child who go to church, homeschool, and woke up with like this completely different reality. If I did not have the mental fortitude to say, I'm gonna smile every day, and I'm gonna forget every day, and I'm gonna keep moving forward every single day, I would fail. So when, for example, when I bought the first piece of land that I wanted to develop, my parents told me, Jesus, Lord, we give you a piece of land. My parents give us all 10,000 square feet of land. And they say that their idea of life was, life is a baton race. My parents run the one leg, I go another leg, and you expected to run another. It's a relay. They all give us up 10,000 square feet of land. And I sold my piece, and my parents were so upset. I said, Lord, why you build a house and do the standard, take a mortgage, and you know the upsetness. And I turned that into 2 acres of land. I said, that is craziness. Turn that into a company, turn that into a development, turn that into now we're wrapping up on building our own office space. You have to not be afraid. And if you don't have a dory mindset, and in all of those, every single one of those projects, massive failures. Like the first day, you could imagine that my father walked close with him in the height of borrowing the most money that I could ever think about borrowing. Instead of building a house, right in the middle of that, my father dies. And I'm relying on him to help me figure this out. Depressed for a year, figuring out, how the heck, Lord Jesus, I took out this big mortgage, father died, spent all the money trying to keep him alive. Like if you're not equipped to forget, you are going to sink. And you have to have that quality of every single day. I wake up, it's a brand new day, put on a smile, and you move forward.
For me, growing up, because my dad was a pastor, he's retired now, so I had a similar life in church. Every time church door open, and when I was young, I didn't appreciate that. I didn't appreciate being a pastor's kid. PK, I felt, abused. I felt like we were, right. So you had to be perfect. You couldn't do the things that other. But what growing up in church did for me, and that I only really got to fully appreciate, is that it gave me that foundation for failure, for challenges, problems, for all of these things. And as you rightly said, you can't be fearful. And for me, I always say fear and faith cannot walk together. They cannot walk together. One must lead, and I chose faith. And I've been choosing faith. But faith without planning is also useless. Faith without works is dead. And so a lot of people, they may be like, oh, I have this business idea, I have this thing, I'm going to be successful. And they're faith in it without putting in the work. And they're failing because they're not putting in the work. So you have to plan. And you said it a while ago. The Bible tells us what to do now. The plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. You have to plan. And if you don't plan and you don't include God in those plans, you're never going to achieve that success. And if you're not grounded in God, when the trials come, when the testings come, you are going to be thrown like the shaft in the wind. It is reality. So for me, everything I do, I keep grounded in God. I can't do anything in and of myself. I can't manifest nothing, and I can't curate, and that's not my superpower. My superpower is having faith in God, putting fear to rest, and letting Him lead while I follow.
And I quite agree. And as you were talking, the verse of Psalm 127 comes to me that except the Lord builds a house, the workman labor in vain. And in vain you get up every day and work for food. You might get the food, but at the end of the day, it might not be sweet. So it is important that we have and we have the faith. We work towards it. We plan, because I know just as I know we're quickly wrapping up, but there are persons who in my profession would come with a plan, and my question would always be, what happens if this plan doesn't work? Well, God will take care of it. I say, no, God will take care of it, but you need to have a plan B, or you need to know that even if you fail, and I think my friend here said that he had his goal, and if he didn't think it considered a failure, I would say, no, you are not a failure. Your plans would have failed, but you are not a failure, so you know to regroup and come again and see what else you can learn from that failed incident, and separate the failure from you, the person. And that's how the growth mentality, and that, as you mentioned, that we have to teach to our children. They're not going to learn it in school necessarily. But we as parents, we have to ensure that we live it and we maintain it.
One other thing I just want to add is that back in my day, there was really a privilege raising young people. I think now so many people are focused on their own goals. As I come back to the whole, they're laser focused on what they're doing. And I know the men are probably going to get a little antsy with what I'm about to say. But I feel like there are more women mentoring young ladies than we have successful men mentoring young men. And we are having an issue because I am also a life skills coach. And the thing about it is, what I've seen is that there's a vulnerable group of young men who are becoming more vulnerable as the years pass. I had young men come into these sessions, and I think, Francis, were you a part of that debate program? Right. And we would have had guys come into these sessions who would ask me, Miss, could you keep my book for me until tomorrow? Because they were from rough areas. And it was difficult for them to be seen with a book going back to these areas. I didn't expect that. And I gladly kept the books for them until the next day. But they told me that there is a problem there, where there's not enough, men who have made it. Once they reach up there and then their boys club, they don't mentor enough of the young men. And, the society suffers for it, because we have the crime rate can speak for itself. So we need to step in.
All right. Thank you very much for that. Very, very good.
I wanted to just
final
add my
point here
last
from
comment to that
yes,
ending
I know
question.
we wrap up because our time is up.
So I would want to coin what you're saying, Maurice, as being mentally resilient, but also not fixating on setbacks, right? I would also want to say, yes, it's important to have community, right? Because as I said, we are human beings, we're social beings. And we can very much attest to the fact that whether it is our community in church, or community in our neighborhood, or even these days online communities, having support and that boost of morale from persons can definitely help, right? However, I just want to take this particular spin. Mind you, I'm an organizational business psychologist. What I focus on is the mindset of the entrepreneur and the leader, the mindset of workers, and the mindset of the consumer. So I don't know much about, I would say, like clinical stuff, right? But just using my base knowledge of psychology, I still think as a psychologist, what I need to advocate for is also getting help, especially given the forum, because it's dedicated to Amrie, right? You said Amrie was somebody who was able to give you that key help. And I do think that in St. Vincent, there's still a stigma attached to that, right? Now, no matter how successful somebody has been, the fact is they might all have experienced moments of darkness, trouble, setbacks. It is important that, yes, we can reframe failure and not look at it as a negative thing. But the thing is, based on how we are as a society, that has already been ingrained in a lot of us. So even before it gets to a point of dealing with a mental issue, sometimes we need to go to the counseling to reframe that simple mindset right there, right? But even beyond that, regardless of whatever the challenge is, once there is some sort of mental health problem, it is important to seek help. And when I say seek help, seek professional help, right? There's a place for pastors to give help. There's a place for community members to give you support. But there's also a place to get professional help, right? And I do think that for me, for where I stand today, a lot of my success has been attributed to the help that I got when I went to UE, and they told me I have a health card that would allow you to access certain things for free. Man, sometimes that counselor used to see me and say, "Franz, what is it today?" Right? I make sure I milk that, because I realize that at the end of the day, for me to attain success, pay had to be intact, right? Because it's from here and here that everything springs forth, right? And they both go hand in hand.
Great. You guys have indeed given us much rich food for thought, and I truly want to thank you for your insights this evening. It has been recorded for posterity. I'm sure those who would have listened and who will watch subsequently will indeed be benefited from the knowledge and experience and wisdom that our panelists have shared with us this evening. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. So until next time, we look forward to another fruitful discussion in this seminar series of the Dr. Amrie Morris Patterson G.I.F.T Foundation. God bless and all success to you in your various endeavors until we meet again. All the best.